Hello and welcome to another episode of 20,000 Leagues Under the Internet. My name is Harland. I am going to be your captain this week as we dive.
Just trying out. Hold on. You're trying out new catchphrases
I've
live?
never done that before. I don't know what happened. Something came
We are
over
live,
me.
live, and we are gonna dive. Welcome to.
Welcome. You've stepped aboard the Glizzy Guzzler, our undersea research facility full of the world's nastiest memes. Join with me as always is Kyle. Kyle, go ahead and say hi.
Hey, I'm really hanging in there.
Yeah, we all are, especially John, who again is not here with us.
He's got a thing going on.
Because he has COVID. He got it.
He's got a thing going on.
Yep.
So,
two of the three of us have been infected.
I had it. But the funny thing for me was I remember I recorded an episode. The next morning I tested positive, but the next time we recorded, I was fine again. So
Yeah.
I didn't actually miss anything. But,
No.
But yeah, John's on the sideline for this one.
Yeah, so he's not going to be with us. God, that sounds like he died already. he's no longer with us. But we are going to talk about some stuff. I have a quick wet market. And it is concerning some new internet slang that I came across hours before we started recording.
Oh yeah, I'm curious what the fuck this is.
And I came across it because somebody.
Wait, slow your roll.
What? Oh, go follow us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube.
Look,
Go to
you
our
guys.
Linktree /20K Leagues pod. Everything you need is there. I think there's even a link to an OnlyFans that I did start, but I cannot post to. So
yeah, you have to have like your face. It does this whole thing.
we talked about it.
Check this out, guys. Harlan and I were literally just talking before we started recording. We were like, oh, we should fucking start recording probably. We've been talking for like 30 minutes. But we don't really promote ourselves very much. And if you like what we're doing, it would really be awesome if you could, what do people say? Ring that bell.
Smash that ring that bell. Pull the big giant rope in the cathedral bell. Go do that.
I'm gonna do one better.
Oh,
I'm gonna say
better than an old cathedral bell tower?
yeah, dude. I'm gonna talk about street team. I'm gonna talk about word of mouth. I'm gonna talk about your friends.
Flash mobs.
I assume most of the people that listen to the show have friends. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't.
I mean, it's been a weird 2 years, man.
maybe you have an enemy.
Yes.
And you want to torture them with
like
some
that
asinine toilet humor. Send them our podcast. I dare you. I fucking double dare you.
One day when you're with your friends, go open Spotify on their phone, find their favorite, their most played playlist, and just
delete
start
it.
No.
Get rid of it. Remove the temptation.
Just sneak an episode, add an episode of our podcast to their favorite playlist, and eventually, one day, it will pop on and they'll be like, what the fuck is happening? Why are they talking about body hair? What is this? It's a great prank to play on your friends. Somebody did it with one of my playlists, and they put the Pina Colada song in there like a dozen times, and it would come on every once in a while, and I would be like, I would be at home, and it would come on, and I would go, you fuck.
You
son of a bitch.
You got me again. Anyways, didn't mean to ruin the wet market.
No, sorry, it's okay.
Get in there.
I'm getting ahead of ourselves because we have a lot to talk about on the main topic, but
Let's get going.
Before we get into that, I came across some internet slang on TikTok. Somebody posted a clip from an episode of Hot Ones that just came out with Khloe Kardashian.
That's who it was.
And there's a question that he's asking her, and he is like, talking about how organized her pantry is, and he was like trying to, you know how Sean Evans gets. He's very good at asking questions and the whole setup to the question. And she stops him and she goes, if you're flirting with me, this is the best flirting a man has ever done. And the video cut to the meme of all the guys just going, oh! It cuts to that. And I looked at the comments because I was like, God damn, that's sick. That's a move. Just like talk about how organized a woman is. And in the comments, people were saying, oh, dude, Sean Evans is rizzed up. He's like got that riz. And I was like, what is riz? And
Like
so
this a lot already.
I found Riz is a New York slang created by YouTuber and Twitch streamer Kai Cenat. It refers to a male's ability to impress women, aka game. Although it's only just circulating on TikTok, the term has existed since at least June of 2021, and he's made several videos dedicated to Riz. So, hey man.
Sounds like he's pretty rizzed up too.
Yeah, dude, he's definitely rizzed up. I'm looking at a photo of him. He's rizzed up.
I gotta say, I watched that episode last week when it came out, and boy, I was like, what the fuck is happening? It was so, she's like, are you hitting on me right now? Like, she was like kind of into it, and he was like, okay, I'm just trying to eat wings.
I know, his reaction at the end is
like,
fucking great.
Like, what do I do?
Are we about to fucking get it on?
Yeah, it's pretty, I was like pretty floored. I did appreciate how forward she was, and I know that it was a joke, but it was like,
right, totally.
I really liked it. I thought it was funny. And I think it's even funnier that this is the context and where Riz fucking reared its head to us elder millennials.
Yes, exactly. Oh, what's this Riz? Khloe Kardashian seems to be getting all the Riz up in her face from Sean Evans.
Putting on the Riz.
Am I right?
Am I right?
So that was our wet market catch, the Riz. No, that's not the Riz, it's just Riz. Anyway.
Yeah, we sound, all the kids are saying the Riz.
I mean, if you're listening, you know, it's a bit. We're doing a bit, man.
You know that I know how to say anthropomorphic.
But it's also not a bit.
I'm doing a bit.
If you say it's a bit when you know it's not, is it still a bit?
I think the bit is me saying it's a bit. I don't think I can't actually say the word.
Well, yeah, for you, but I'm talking about being dummy elder millennials who are just learning things. Anyway, it's a bit. It's not a bit, but it's a bit. Let's get into the main topic. This week, we are going to be talking about something that Kyle and I hold near and dear to our hearts that exists on the internet and outside of the internet, more outside of the internet. But we've been talking a lot about sort of dystopic, sad, depressing, feel bad things that are happening on the internet with AI and anti-privacy shit. So I was like, you know what? What's something that I really like? I want to talk about that's not gonna make me feel icky. And so this week we're gonna talk about RPG actual plays. So let's dive in. So what are those words I just said? I assume that a lot of people aren't familiar with role-playing games outside of maybe World of Warcraft. I mean, I'm speaking in the general population, right? Like if you just stop somebody on the street and was like, what's an RPG or what's a TTRPG? They would be like, well, I'm sorry, huh? So role-playing games are Dungeons and Dragons. We know Dungeons and Dragons. You've heard the words.
You've beaten people up over Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, there was that shitty movie from the 80s with Jeremy Irons.
I said follow me!
I just alienated so much more of the listeners.
But oddly enough, has been a talking point on one of the tabletop RPG fucking actual play podcasts that I listen to almost monthly. That's
hilarious. So... Yeah. So this episode, I know I prefaced it by saying we're talking about RPGs, like as in general, but I want to focus specifically on Dungeons and Dragons because it is the most well-known RPG in terms of like pop culture. So I know there's like Warhammer and some other stuff, but like Dungeons and Dragons, right? That's what most people know as an RPG. So Dungeons and Dragons dates back to 1974 and was created by a guy named Gary Gygax, which, by the way, the guy that created Dungeons and Dragons has a last name that sounds like a fucking Dungeons and Dragons monster, which is incredible to me.
Or some sort of weapon.
Yeah, exactly. The holy Gygax.
He wields the Gygax.
Also, get ready for Kyle to do a whole bunch of character voices in this episode.
It will be fun, I promise.
So, Gary, it was created in 1974. It was later purchased by Wizards of the Coast in 1997, which is another RPG publisher that was itself created in 1990. And then that was purchased in 1999 by Hasbro. So all of these little things are all now owned by Hasbro.
Hasbro is always like the fucking corporate, like, what's up? We made the game of life.
Yeah, they're like
or whatever.
They're like what like Apple to technology is to like fantasy sci-fi role playing. Basically,
I will also
at this
say
point.
the name Hasbro is hilarious to me because it's like you just want a friend, you Hasbro. Like, and you're gonna play these nerdy games to try to find friends. You're not. You're gonna...
Hasbro has bros.
Has no bro.
Yeah, exactly. Actual play, which is basically watching or reading about other people playing games, which on the surface, because we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, sounds super fucking nerdy, but you have to also take into consideration, if you're listening and you're thinking that it sounds really nerdy, like, there's streamers on Twitch. Remember when esports was like a huge, I mean, it still is, but when esports was like a big thing, like, it's no different than that, basically, because it's rooted in magazine play reports of old war games, and then it moved on to like internet forums that were dedicated to role-playing games.
What is a magazine play? Do you know? Do you have
A play report?
Yeah, what is that?
I didn't go into that much detail because there was
for sure.
so much other stuff. But
that I put a little flag. I'm flagging that.
Kyle's gonna look up eBay for old war game play reports.
I'm just curious, like, see what kind of writers were. Yeah, what they were doing.
I'm sure it's super interesting. I mean, I recently watched like a history of like the
Violence,
development,
starring Viggo Mortensen, and it's fantastic.
I mean, a history of violence. I mean, could be an alternate title to like a D&D documentary.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Keep going.
But yeah, I watched a documentary about like first edition D&D, and like it was all manuals, it was all paperback books, and I'm sure it was like the same thing where like these weekly newsletters would go out. You would like mail in, buy them, and like subscribe to them, and they would be like little black and white things that had play reports, I assume. But anyway, that moved on to the internet, and then obviously, like I was saying, the emergence of esports, live streaming, actual play, TTRPG, which is tabletop role-playing game, became popular when podcasts started coming out, and also just as web series, and it contributed to like the resurgence of TTRPGs in the 2010s.
It's kind of wild. It like immediately makes me think of like Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune.
Oh, here we go.
Here he goes talking about Dune again. Here's the thing. The second book, Dune Messiah, came out. Like, so Dune 1 was out. Yeah, it was being read, whatever. But it wasn't the tour de force that we know it as today. Like, It wasn't as widely accepted. So Messiah was released monthly in chunks in a magazine.
Wasn't Lord of the Rings kind of like that too initially?
Oh, I don't know. That would make sense though.
Or The
because
Hobbit,
it's like,
maybe?
It's like finding a way to disseminate a story, like a story, like over time.
Yeah.
And this is what podcasts that are doing these kind of things are like emulating in a way.
Yeah.
Obviously on a more rapid basis, like a weekly basis, more than likely. But
well, and if you really think about it too, like what are role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons aside from just improvised storytelling, right? Like it's no different than The Hobbit or what Frank Herbert was doing, where they're like, oh, I wrote this part, I'm going to publish that.
Right,
it's the same
exactly.
thing. Weekly, you're telling a chapter,
it's a
however.
cadence.
Yeah, exactly. You're playing the chapters with Dungeons and Dragons, and then you're disseminating that to your artists, creating a whole entire world and all this stuff and characters. So it's not really that much different. You're just rolling dice while you're doing it to determine where this story goes. So in 2008, the creators of Penny Arcade, which is one of the longest running web comics that was focused on video games and gaming culture, partnered with Wizards of the Coast to create a podcast of a few 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons adventures, which led to the creation of the Acquisitions Incorporated podcast. Now, I said 4th edition, which is the 4th version of Dungeons and Dragons for people who are unaware. I really don't want to alienate people in this episode by talking about some of this stuff, because I know a lot of people tune out when it comes to like role-playing games and
if there's one thing I love is the fucking details of this shit. So I will interrupt you and I will make sure that we are get everyone on the same page, baby.
Honestly, no shade to John, but like I feel like John would have felt so like out of place, like third wheel in this conversation in this episode.
I mean, he would have had fun, but he'd be like just going like this a lot. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What the fuck is that? Okay. Interesting. What in the fuck? Wow.
After that podcast was well received, the players began to live stream the game starting in 2010 at the Penny Arcade Expo, also known as PAX Festival. Acquisitions Incorporated went on to be described by Inverse in 2019 as the longest running live play game. I assume in existence because they started in 2008.
Yeah,
2010.
the OG basically.
Yeah, so so that's just kind of like where the Dungeons and Dragons actual play stuff started, right? That's our baseline. It's a that's a big baseline. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is because there are a lot of factors that I think led to this increase in people playing Dungeons and Dragons and doing actual play podcasts and like shows on YouTube and Twitch and other independent platforms, which is the release of 5th edition. And so 5th edition came out in January of 2012. Wizards of the Coast announced that it was a new edition of the game, at the time being referred to as D&D Next. And in direct contrast to previous editions of the game, D&D Next was developed partly via a public open playtest. So they had never done that before. And I assume like the internet probably helped them do that.
Yes, 4th edition was received very mixed. So they didn't, Wizards of the Coast was like, well, let's fix this. We're bleeding players.
Yeah.
Let's listen to the players, etc. So yeah.
And so an early build of the new edition debuted at the 2012 Dungeons and Dragons Experience event to only about 500 fans, which living in 2022, that number seems wildly low for Dungeons and Dragons involvement. But
right, sure.
It was a different time. Now for all the people who like D&D, I want to go over some of the mechanics that were changed, just basically for you guys. For anybody that's interested and has never played D&D, this might be helpful in understanding, I think, where I'm coming from in terms of like the popularity that came with 5th edition, because overall, they simplified it and made it more streamlined, right? So skills, weapons, items, saving throws, and other things that characters are trained in now all use single proficiency bonuses that increase as a character level increases. I don't know what it was like before. Kyle, you might have a better idea of how that stuff sort of worked.
I can speak to gamers when I say this. 5e is Skyrim, and 3rd edition, and before that is Oblivion and Morrowind.
I knew you were going to say Morrowind.
And Arena.
Yeah.
Like basically, Skyrim gets a lot of flack for simplifying a lot of Skyrim by Bethesda, the 5th installment of Elder Scrolls, the Elder Scrolls series, very, very popular RPG, is criticized only basically because it simplified a lot of the amazing systems that were a little chunky, crunchier, that existed, that were a little more maybe rewarding, but they could alienate and, cut off like new blood essentially. Skyrim's greatest success is that it's now been it's been out for 10 years and it's been re-released on every possible platform a million times over because it's super fucking accessible. Yeah. So Skyrim, like 5e, really brought the RPG to like the TTRPG in case of 5e to the public household. To everybody. So while you might be missing some of those crunchier things from 3rd edition, like I am, you have to just appreciate the accessibility to get all your other friends down this fucking rabbit hole with you.
Which is something that we'll touch on a little later. But continuing with some of these mechanics, multiple defense values were removed, returning to a single defense value armor class and using more traditional saving throws. Saving throws are reworked to be situational checks based on 6 core abilities instead of generic d20 rolls. Feats are now optional, and they can be taken instead of ability score increases. Advantage and disadvantage mechanic was introduced, which I didn't know was in 5th edition. That was a brand new thing, which streamlined conditional situational modifiers. Let's see. The power system in 4th edition was replaced. Clerics, druids, paladins, and wizards prepared known spells using slightly modified versions of the spells. Preparation. Healing surges are replaced by hit dice, requiring a character to roll a hit die during a short rest instead of a healing flat rate of hit points. So this was all very interesting for me as someone who's only played 5th edition, to find out like, wow, a lot of this stuff that's in 5th edition is brand fucking new. And it wasn't around before.
But is also kind of considered a standard now for other systems.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
other systems borrow from these ideas of 5e.
Which is funny because again, like 5e came out like officially in like 2014. Like
I know.
it hasn't been around.
It's not that long.
No. So that's sort of what was streamlined and changed to, like we were saying, make it more accessible. And like, it makes sense, right? You're a business. You need, in order to survive and sustain as a business, you kind of have to I don't want to say pander, but you have to listen to your core audience, right? Your core demographic and your clients, your customers. And so they did that, and it was a huge boon for Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. But like I said, the thing I want to talk about mainly are like the popularity, which involves some of the shows that exist. And I'm going to talk about, I think it's 4 of the more famous shows that exist right now. But before that, so one of the long-running campaign podcasts started in 2009. It was called Critical Hit, and they were using 4th edition. And Nerd Poker, which had people like comics at the time, like Brian Posehn and Patton Oswalt on. And that started in 2012. They were initially running 2nd edition, then they switched to 4th, and then they went back to 2nd edition, I assume because of how broken and bad 4th edition was.
It's funny because if you played 2nd edition, you know how ridiculous that statement is.
Yeah. So they've been building their fan base for like a decade or more.
Harlan, can I ask you if you've
up?
come across the term THACO?
Yes, I have.
Okay, cool.
I can't remember. It was in that documentary I watched.
It's 2-hit armor class 0.
Yeah,
it's
and
like
I was so fucking confused.
The asinine way we used to calculate if it was a hit or not. And your armor class you're working to go negative instead of higher.
I already am like,
yeah.
I see that, and this is the thing. Like, I want to tell people listening who are maybe about to tune out. If you already have, sorry. There's a part of me that is right there with you in terms of some of the crunchier aspects of mechanics in stuff like this. It's one of the reasons why, like, I will never play Warhammer 40K. I will fuck that. Like, never get into it. There's too much happening. There's even some video games where I'm like, I don't have the time to learn all this. I don't want to. I feel like I'm in school sometimes.
There's a game for everybody right now. 5e is. If anyone is remotely interested in a TTRPG, 5e is your jam.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. And it will unlock so many creative ideas in your head.
Very easy to get into.
Yeah. So
that's its strength, baby.
So those two podcasts are probably some of the longest running actual plays that exist. Let's see. But I think some of the other ones that helped, aside from 5e being released, some of the podcasts that helped bring Dungeons and Dragons and RPGs and this improvisational storytelling to a broader audience are things like Critical Role, The Adventure Zone, Dimension 20, and Glass Cannon. And these are all some of our favorite RPGs that we listen to. And Critical Role is the first one I want to talk about because they didn't start until 2015. So this is a year after 5th edition came out.
Yeah.
It's run by a voice actor, a very well-known outside of D&D voice actor named Matt Mercer.
It's high noon.
He's an incredible DM, and it started initially as let's see, it was just them playing D&D, and let's see, the show got its start when the staff of Felicia Day's gaming and pop culture website Geek and Sundry learned about a weekly D&D gathering in Los Angeles featuring a group of popular voice actors, Matt Mercer, and like 7 or 8 other people among them. Geek and Sundry reached out about broadcasting the campaign on its Twitch channel, and after that, they switched from playing Pathfinder to 5e to simplify the gameplay for a viewing audience.
What's so silly is at this time in my life, I put my eggs in the wrong basket, apparently. I was trying to become a professional musician, and I really should have just been embracing my geeky roots and joining this renaissance from the beginning.
I know, it's
what the fuck?
Even when you were in a band, I think everyone was like, there's no way you're gonna make this professionally. Look at all the fucking bands in San Francisco that are coming out playing the same old psych rock music.
Not even that. It's like, 4 white dudes in a band. Have you guys heard of Band of Horses? Like, doesn't matter what you're fucking playing. There's no appeal.
Yeah.
There's nothing there. There's nothing there. It doesn't matter how good you are.
No. So, I mean, it matters who you know, or if you're a famous son of someone.
Sure.
You would have made it then.
That's true. I wish I was a famous son.
I have a quote here from Matt Mercer, and he says, "It wasn't something we initially were looking to do, but we agreed from that point Critical Role was has kind of become this unexpected phenomenon. He has done voice work in video games such as Overwatch, Destiny 2, and Star Wars Battlefront, which is kind of wild."
Yeah. Also, I want to just point out that if any podcast was gonna take it, you have to have the right marketing and branding. Critical Role is the perfect fucking name.
Yeah. ROLE.
Yes.
Just so everyone knows.
It's a play. It's a whole thing. Criticals are a thing. Roles are a thing in both ways. It's just like
acting and playing.
It's like you in the case of their name, which is ROLE. It's like each player has a critical role to play. It's like just well done.
It's so fucking good.
It's so good.
It pisses me off so goddamn much.
It's so good.
So that's just a brief little back history of Critical Role. The other one I want to talk about is Adventure Zone, which is how I was introduced to D&D. It debuted in the summer of 2014 with the newly released 5e starter set featuring the McElroy brothers, who, if that name sounds familiar, are the hosts of My Brother and Me, one of the largest fucking podcasts in the world.
Like, yeah.
And
back when you had to listen to podcasts on an iPod.
Yeah, you couldn't get them anywhere else.
Yeah.
The first, so they started playing with their dad, Clint. The first of these recordings were initially released as an experimental My Brother and Me episode entitled The Adventure Zone.
A play on their other segment, which was called The Money Zone, which is where they read their advertisements. So this was supposed to be The Adventure Zone.
Yes, exactly. And so that episode debuted August 18th of 2014 to cover for Justin's paternity leave. Justin's one of the brothers. He had a child. Starting that December, The Adventure Zone was then expanded into its own podcast on the Maximum Fun Network, releasing bi-weekly. Griffin McElroy served as the show's primary host and dungeon master for the show's first campaign, later titled Balance. The campaign concluded, which this is hilarious to me and very on brand for the McElroy brothers. The campaign concluded with episode 69 in August of 2017. It has featured several other TTRPG systems since, and as of 2021, it received over 6 million monthly downloads. So
yeah, that's wild.
The thing that sets these two apart, and this will be a recurring theme between all of these podcasts that I've picked for us to talk about briefly, is they all play D&D very differently, which is another thing that I don't think a lot of people understand is something that can happen within D&D. I think the majority of people, when they hear D&D, they hear dorky nerd fantasy stuff with minifigs and battle maps. And And
Sorry, and that's not MANYFIGS, like the fruit.
No,
We're talking
no,
miniature
figs.
miniature figurines.
Miniature figurines.
We sit with our mini figs and devour them.
So stupid. So I think people think that that's like the entirety of how Dungeons and Dragons is played. It's like all high fantasy, right? But like, depending on who's running it and who you're playing with, there are so many different themes and so many different styles. Like, you can do that grimdark shit where it's just like, fantasy. Or you can do like more whimsical stuff, like how the Adventure Zone worked. Like, it wasn't all doom and gloom. It was pretty like lighthearted to a certain extent and had its own, it evoked its own like emotion and feeling and style. And all of these do that. They're all so wildly different, which is, not to like gush too much about D&D, but that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this episode about it. But like, that's one of the best things about Dungeons and Dragons or any RPG, like really, is you can kind of take the rule book and go, I'm gonna like take some of it, but I want to play it how I want to play it. And that's incredible.
It's more about, it should be, and this came up recently, and something that I don't know if Harland, if you ended up watching it or how much of it you watched, but I was watching. Some of the guys from Glass Cannon were talking about, I think it's called OSRs.
Yeah, that came up in this, but I can't remember what it is.
What it is the original idea of TTRPGs actually had very little rules. I think it's called old school rule systems is what OSRs is.
Old school revival.
Yeah, old school revival. So basically, it's the idea that less is more,
right?
And you go and you play this game, you're role playing, you're experiencing this shared narrative together. And when you have to resolve something, you have rules to fall back on when you need it.
Right.
It's like a rules backseat kind of thing versus games nowadays. Well, like 3rd and 4th edition of D&D where rules very front seat. D&D right now is like it's a soccer mom kind of van and the rules are in the middle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like a backseat driver. Kind of leaning over the dash every once in a while, be like,
but
check engine lights on. We might want to stop.
Exactly, but the DM can be like, get back there. You can't touch me. I'm still driving. You know what I mean? Like,
and that is ignoring the check engine light for another 10,000 miles.
So OSR shit. You know what I mean? It's like, it's really, the rules are there. They're there for your interpretation. They're there to help guide you. But really, when it comes down to it, it's your game. Play it the way you want to play it.
So the other popular one I want to talk about, which is my favorite, is Dimension 20. It debuted in 2018 with a show called Fantasy High as a production of Dropout, which is college, or technically it's still a College Humor. College Humor's streaming service. And it was among one of the new shows listed for the service when it was first unveiled. So 2018, they launched this streaming platform where it would have Dimension 20, it would have some of their other like sketch comedy things and other incredible shows that are not D&D related. If you like independent comedy, go over there and plug in Dropout. It's $5 a month. It's fucking crazy.
It's $5 and there's just so much stuff. You will laugh. You will laugh.
You will laugh.
You'll bend the knee.
I highly recommend Total Forgiveness as a must watch from them. Anyway. So that started in 2018. The DM.
You're welcome, Dropout. We just solved their subscriber problem.
Sam Reich, where's my check, you fuck? I know you're good for it. Your dad is Robert Reich. God. So that one is DM'd by Brennan Lee Mulligan, and who cited a number of existing tabletop shows as inspiration for Dimension 20. Including Not Another D&D Podcast, The Adventure Zone, and Critical Role. The format for that show was is that it has distinct arcs based on different settings and is composed mostly of improvisational comedians and comedy writers. Episodes of Fantasy High sophomore year, which was the follow-up to their first one, were streamed live on Twitch as opposed to the pre-recorded, edited, and uploaded versions that would go to Dropout, which I only point out because Critical Role was a full-on live stream. There were no cuts, there were no edits. It's, if you go watch the episodes on YouTube, it's literally just like static panels of the DM and all the players. There's not a lot of flash when it comes to the editing or post-production, which is one of the things that sets Dimension 20 apart, and I think why it's as popular, maybe not as popular as like Critical Role, but it's up there in terms of...
I mean, what is, though?
Which we will get to later because it's fucking nuts. Critical Role blows my mind, their fan base. But Dimension 20, again, to sort of talk about how there's different ways to play D&D, there are different ways to produce it too. And it creates a totally different experience. And sometimes for the better, maybe some people would disagree, whatever. They did. Oh, the other thing why I wanted to point that out is the funny thing about them doing the live second season of Fantasy High is that there are no cuts, and you would never tell the difference between the live ones and the edited episodes. That's how good I think those players and
it's a chemistry thing.
Yeah, and Brennan is as a DM too, because I'm watching Critical Role's Calamity with Brennan just to see. It's like the only way I can watch Critical Role, sorry. But there are so many points in those streams where there is lull and a silence, and people are, it feels like sometimes they're like, okay, what do I do? And in Dimension 20's live, none of that fucking exists, which is just commendable on the part of the role players.
Right, for sure. And there's also the argument of like, well, I mean, this is why this is so awesome.
It's so fucking sick, dude.
Because there's something for literally everybody.
Yeah.
The main podcast I listen to, as an example, is supposed their whole ethos is it's supposed to feel like you're sitting around the table hanging around with them. And there are plenty of lulls, there's plenty of tangents. They are not solely focused on what is happening in the game 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Which drives a lot of people crazy, but it's what I like because it's almost like I'm, they're hanging out with them. So
that's how Critical Role is too.
And that's how Critical Role is. Yeah, yeah.
They want it to feel like you're watching friends play a game of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. So, but there's like the element of like, is this going to be a show where we're 100% focused? Is this a thing where we're literally just the cameras are rolling and we're dicking around?
Yeah.
Like, all those things are turn-offs and turn-ons for people, but there's so many options.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're only talking really about 5e right now. There's so many.
Yeah, this well is probably one of the deepest wells that we will never be able to talk about.
Are you tired of television? Well, boy, have I got a drug for you.
Fucking Dungeons and Dragons.
I don't even listen to music anymore because I need to listen to D&D only.
It's so funny you bring that up. I literally, when it comes to music at this point, I have a playlist of a bunch of oldies, like 60s, 70s pop, and then I have like 3 or 4 albums that are on repeat when I'm not listening to D&D.
Yeah.
It changes your life.
It does. In a really great way, though.
In a great way, yes. So he got a lot of inspiration from those other things. They did that. The season concluded.
I do want to just raise this. I wonder if, because he cites Adventure Zone, and then they've since collaborated later. But I do wonder if the Adventure Zone is the reason why D20 and Dimension 20 was greenlit at all.
I know Brennan Lee Mulligan was hired on to College Humor way before they did Dimension 20 as a writer initially, and then as a cast member.
Maybe he was like, I have an idea.
He pitched it 100%.
Yeah.
Because Brennan Lee Mulligan, with a lot of these, maybe not so much the McElroys, but with a lot of these DMs, they've played D&D like their entire lives. Like Brennan Lee Mulligan initially volunteered at a LARP camp when he was a teenager. Eventually, it got to the point where the people that could not run it were like, Brennan, he was like in his teens. Like, I don't even think he was 17 yet. And they were like, do you want to just run this place? So it was two teenagers, or like him and his friends who were teenagers, running a summer camp for a bunch of preteens. And they were like the boss. So like he has a long history of LARPing and RPGs and writing his own. I think he did an interview with his mom on the last season of Dimension 20. His mom is like a writer, and she writes Starstruck Odyssey, which is a comic book, and they do like a talk back with her, and she's like, yeah, the first time you played D&D, you were like 8 years old, and you were writing campaigns when you were 8 years old.
Yeah.
So a lot of these people have this long history of D&D.
It's their time.
And yeah, now they're some of the best DMs in the world, which I didn't even know could be a job, which is crazy.
I want to see like the DMs League where they all meet and there's like a
DMs of the world combine. So that final season that they streamed concluded literally, I think the last 2 episodes they had to do from home because it was happening as COVID was. It was like literally March or February, and so they had to do them remotely on Zoom. And the final one I have here is the Glass Cannon. Obviously, Kyle, you're more familiar with some of the history and the people involved in this, but just quickly. They play Pathfinder, which is owned or created by Paizo, right? Paizo Publishing?
Yeah, and it's just an offshoot of D&D 3rd edition, basically.
And so the first episode of that was released also in 2015. It started as the idea of Troy LaValle, who is the DM, and it happened when he was getting back into stand-up comedy, and he was listening to some RPG podcasts. And he just so happened to sample Nerd Poker, which is one of the first ones we talked about, and also the Adventure Zone. He said during this time, he thought, my gaming group is way funnier than this, and we play the game at such a higher level. Why the hell aren't we doing a podcast?
He's such a dick. I love it. He's such an ass.
Geek and Sundry reviewed it as one of the best tabletop podcasts. Forbes also described it as engaging in body, but not for kids.
Definitely not. Also, I love that that's a quote from Troy being like, we're way funnier than all these other people doing it. Let's fucking do it.
Yeah, professional comedians.
Exactly. Here's the fucking funny thing about Glass Cannon. There's a player, a contributor on their network named by the name of Matthew Capitacasa, and he doesn't drink the Kool-Aid the same way everyone else does, where they all get high on each other's fumes, and it's really hilarious. But he constantly calls people out. He's like, I don't know anyone else who hypes themselves up as much as you guys do. And it's true, because they through that self-hype they have built this empire, which we can talk about or not talk about, but like it's hilarious that there's one dude on their crew that's like, you guys are fucking asshats.
Well, and again, like at the end of the day, all of these different podcasts, whether it's the ones we mentioned or other ones, it is that thing of like, they are a brand, like, and every brand is going to cater to a different demographic of people, and they all do that. And that, again, it just speaks to the power of something like this type of storytelling and what you can do with it and how you can approach it, especially as a DM who's like, we're the best, fuck all those other ones, while secretly I actually really like them and they're really good. And I take a lot of inspiration from them.
Yeah, there's the outward persona versus the insecurity.
Exactly. Yeah. So
totally.
There's another, let's see. So newer actual play podcasts, kind of like what we've been saying, have redefined what D&D looks like. With comedy and personality, meaning just as much as the campaign is storytelling. I mentioned like things like the difference between something that's like grimdark versus like whimsical rules light, or even like straight up just satire, like parody.
Yeah.
So Nathan Stewart, who is the senior director of Dungeons and Dragons, says over half of the new people who started playing 5th edition got into D&D through watching people play online. Matthew Mercer, there's another quote, says role-playing games are just an organic, improvised space for storytelling. And this is where I want to get into the popularity, if it's not already clear why this has become so popular. There's a lot of factors at play here. One of them being the interactivity of live streams like Critical Role, where viewers can comment as it's playing in real time, they can pose questions, and they can affect, in some cases, the course of the gameplay it creates this really uniquely addictive viewing experience, right? It's part game show, it's part talk show, it's part fantasy adventure serial.
Yeah, can you imagine watching your favorite fucking TV show and being able to like
watching Friends and be like, Joey's at it again.
Yeah, but if it was like a live show and like you're like able to text or like type with everybody, because people do this with live tweeting when they're like, I'm gonna live tweet the fucking release of whatever.
Yeah.
It's the same thing except that you're actually interacting and the players may see it. Yeah, and interact or react to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And change the course of the story.
Yeah. So it's also, I think, gained a lot of popularity because it's also common for gamers who get hooked on these series to begin broadcasting their own campaigns. You know, it's an outlet for aspiring performers who don't necessarily have a clear path to traditional media. Like if you want to be an actor or you want to be a voice actor or you want to like be a prop master, like you can go do that with your friends playing D&D. Obviously, there's some money that might be involved in some of those things, but I mean, relatively, you can get a decent camera for a couple $100, decent mics for less than that, and hook it up to your computer and fucking just start playing games on Twitch. Mercer specifically says there aren't a lot of entertainment-based mediums, the visual or recorded mediums, that empower the audience to go off the next day and create it themselves. You can't watch a movie or a show and the next day say, I want to go make that. You have to go to school. People watch these shows and think, I could do that. Like, and that is so much of the world outside of D&D that we live in, too. I mean, we're doing a podcast. We started out with the cheapest fucking mics that we could for the same reason,
dude,
to just like hang out with each other. You can do the same thing. If you want to add some rules, hey, you got D&D. It's literally it. If you think you can do it.
It's pretty wild. I had to describe D&D to someone who is uninitiated recently because I was like, I'm going to go see a live D&D show. Well, it wasn't D&D, but whatever. We went and saw Glass Cannon live in San Francisco recently. Yeah. And I was telling someone and they were like, wait, I'm so confused. What are you going to do? Aren't they going to be sitting? I think they, in their mind, they were going to be on stage with their backs to us around like a table or something.
Oh my God.
And they're like, how are you going to enjoy that? I was like, no. This is basically, it's their live show. It's different than their normal show. They're basically just making dick jokes, but with a rule set.
Yeah.
I don't know how to, I was like, I don't know how to describe it otherwise.
They're like, pretending to be other people. And also, though, like breaking character and making dick jokes, but also following rules and a plot that's being also made up, sometimes on the spot, but sometimes not. And then there's like maps and stuff.
And also DMX is there. I don't know. Don't.
And then there's like other weird meta shit that happens where they just drop a fucking beat out of nowhere and everyone's supposed to get it.
Exactly.
So, you know, as a result of all of this, you get this vast ecosystem of live play series that populate YouTube and Twitch, and the total unique hours of D&D live play content on Twitch has doubled every year since 2015.
That's a wild fucking stat.
Yeah. So the Dungeons and Dragons team is aggressively investing in the scene as well, filling its official Twitch channel with more than 50 weekly hours of live play programming, either produced or sponsored by Wizards of the Coast.
Whoa.
Nathan Stewart, the senior director of D&D, says, quote, a year ago, we probably had 2 shows we'd put on Twitch. Now it's more than like 20.
Fuck.
Yeah. So there's a huge, which, I mean, you could feel one way or the other about saturating the market, you know, with this, but I think on the whole, this is still such a small niche.
I'm for it, dude.
Oh, 100% I am too. But I know there are gatekeepers out there that are like, well, if everyone likes it, then it's not my favorite thing anymore. It's like, fuck off.
I used to be that way in a little bit because, I don't know. It's like you have like a weird chip on your shoulder, or at least maybe it's just a mental problem I have about shit I like, and I want it to be unique to me. I have to say, I am so happy that Dungeons and Dragons has become
a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, like what it is. Like the more people, I remember the first time I experienced this really was like when Star Wars was getting rebooted to do The Force Awakens. And I had this moment where I was like, oh, am I bummed that like more people are going to get into Star Wars? And I was like, no, wait, this is sick.
You know what's funny?
Obviously, those movies end up
I
sucking.
know, I was just going to say, it's funny how things have changed since all of them have come out. It's like, man, this really does suck. Actually, I don't want more people to watch Star Wars. They all are toxic as shit.
But you know what I mean, though? It was like
Yeah,
this thing of like, this is
initially.
my precious thing that... And it came down to like, well, if it's popular, that means I get more of it myself too.
Yeah, totally.
So and now, so I've completely let go of that part of myself, and I'm just super down to be for things to become popular. As long as the right people are holding the reins, you can find a piece of it that you like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I love it.
And it's not to say that all of it's going to be good.
No.
That's
as we're about to find out.
That's a crazy
for
thing
ourselves.
to think that you know it's all gonna be good. But like I don't think that's a uniquely Kyle experience either. Like I did that when I was a teenager. When it came
It's
to
a very
music and
punk
shit.
rock. Yeah, it's like a weird ownership of like pride. Like
It
weird.
is punk rock, but it's also so not punk rock at the same time.
It's like
It's a
I don't
weird.
want to say childish. I don't
It's
know what's the
super
word I'm looking for.
It is very childish. I think it is. That is the best way to
Share your
describe it.
love.
Yes, exactly. Get more people to like what you like,
Yeah.
and then you'll be happier. Yeah, you know.
Ultimately, you'll be happier.
This comes down to, well, this doesn't come down to, but this brings me to the next part of this story, which is the user experience too, because there are lots of resources that exist now because of the internet that people can use to get into things like D&D, right? So D&D Beyond, I'm basically just going to talk about D&D Beyond because there's so many other things that we can't get into.
There's no way. Yeah.
So D&D Beyond was a website that was launched in 2017. It was later acquired in 2018 by Fandom. In 2020, Adam Bradford, vice president of the tabletop gaming at Fandom, told Sci-Fi Wire that D&D Beyond's normal number of new users had doubled in the past 2 weeks during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that there was also a similar increase in the number of active users. So D&D Beyond basically is a all-in-one source for everything D&D 5e related, basically. It's a repository, it's the player's handbook, it's the monster manual,
It's a store.
It's the store, it's your character sheet, it's everything.
I've literally been like I've played 5e campaigns where the DM is required that we use D&D Beyond, and it's awesome because you can have all the character sheets stored alongside a campaign, so the DM always has access to the character sheets and everything.
You can share things between characters. You can it's pretty incredible.
It's pretty cool.
The user interface is relatively simple to use. So again, it all just comes down to ease of use and why, being one of the factors why this explosion has happened literally since 2015. Like 2015 was the year D&D was like, here we go. And so D&D Beyond, the pandemic had a lot to do with people being bored at home, finding this through podcasts or Twitch or YouTube, and then finding D&D Beyond. Because I think if you search, it's like top search results for anything D&D at this point. So of course, they're gonna get the most traction and get these people to start using their service. In 2020, the Wall Street Journal reported that, quote, Bradford said the number of registered users had tripled in the past month, and the number of online players at any one time has doubled on average. The uptake has forced the company to accelerate the expansion of its infrastructure, which otherwise would have taken place months from now. In 2022, 2 months ago, Hasbro announced, again, here's Big Daddy Hasbro with all the money, shows up, and they acquired D&D Beyond for $146 million. They absorbed Hasbro into Wizards of the Coast, so now it's all one thing. It's all centralized, localized. Polygon highlighted that Wizards of the Coast is a large portion of Hasbro's overall earnings since the launch of 5th edition, with an operating profit of $547 million in 2021. Wizards' business unit accounted for 72% of Hasbro's operating profit for the year.
Ooh, baby.
Yeah, they reportedly have close to 10 million users right now. So some of these other online resources are things like Roll20, which is like a map maker essentially, Hero Forge, which is a character builder that you can then purchase 3D printed minifigs, not the fruit. Incarnate is a one that I really enjoyed using, which was a map maker. Sirenscape, which is for audio stuff.
Yeah, like
music,
soundtracks,
sound effects.
Foley, etc.
Hero Lab is a sort of all-encompassing character builder, but it also includes other TTRPGs.
Yeah, it's like community funded or like fueled content sort of thing. Yeah.
And then there's also Tailspire, which is one of the newer ones, which is like a fully 3D world building map maker.
Which looks insane. I want to kind of mess around with it a little bit.
It's super insane, and Hero Forge plugs directly into it, so you can take your minifigs.
Oh shit!
Drop
That's
them
really
right
cool.
into the 3-dimensional Tailspire maps that you make. So again, I mentioned like the COVID thing. In 2019 or 2020, things were pretty fucked, and D&D is an incredible way to escape from the dark dystopian timeline that we have now descended into. Even somebody that I would never assume would have anything to do with D&D, John's wife, Kat, I messaged her on Instagram. She posted something about Dungeons and Dragons, and I was like, oh shit, are you gonna make a character? And she was like, I don't know, should I? Is it fun? Is it cool? And I was like, fuck yeah, it is. Go make a fucking character in D&D Beyond and just kill hours of time not thinking about how awful the real world is.
Exploring the fantasy of this idea. Yeah.
The other big thing, which is where we will most likely end this episode, I know we might go over a little bit, but is the inclusive nature of D&D. Which
I was like, how have we waited this long to talk about it? This is like the thing.
This is the thing, right? Well, it's the thing for some people and other people.
For the user, not for Hasbro. Well, maybe it kind of feeds into what Hasbro needs, but
well, it's more about the gatekeepers that we mentioned earlier, not really being about this inclusivity. But Nathan Stewart, again, the senior director of D&D, said, quote, "We're trying to show a pretty diverse group of people playing D&D. It's a value of the company. We want people to feel accepted and welcome in our groups." So their docket of shows includes things like Dragon Friends, this is literally a quote of the description. A show where a bunch of a bunch of idiot Australian comedians muddle their way through a Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
Amazing.
And Girls Guts Glory, in which a lot of time is spent drinking wine, eating food, and catching up before we even start playing. Stewart is hoping to eventually launch a live play series entirely in Spanish and German as well.
Ooh, that's awesome.
German D&D? Holy shit.
It exists. It's just not on a commercialized podcast.
No,
yet.
I know, but like just the German language, listening to them play D&D, these like fantasy characters, sounds like Rammstein without music.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Sounds awesome. So, in addition to the demographic diversity, curating a channel with something for everyone also means seeking out different types of gameplay. Another quote from Stewart, he says, "Some people like the DMs who are tough and challenging and put them on death's door. Others who do a good job reading the table and making sure everyone has fun." Orion Black, who is the creative director of Dimension 20 now, he is a non-binary, agender person of color, was introduced to tabletop RPGs in high school, but quickly realized that at the time that D&D was a white male-dominated space, and it still is. But not that I don't mean that as a good thing. It's a bad thing.
Just keep doing things.
Don't take that out of context. That's not what I mean.
Yeah. No, I don't think it came across that way.
Okay,
and it still is.
No. But Black is one of many creators who is reshaping those games and the spaces where people play them into a safer, more inclusive space by better representing the genre's growing diverse audience and are more welcoming to people who want to learn to play. Which, in anything, any arena where you are playing or it's a participatory thing, there will always be people. I mean, when I was a skateboarder, I was terrified to go to a skate park because I was afraid people were going to make fun of me for not being able to do it good. And that literally, like
to launch well.
Yeah, to do the ollie. But that exists in anything that anyone does. That fear of not being good enough or not being accepted.
But it's a little gnarlier when it's your identity.
Yes. Or you playing out fantasies that are partially representative of who you are as a real person, which is so much about D&D.
Like being closeted and experimenting with role-playing.
Yeah,
the thing you're closeted about, you know, it's like as long as the table's good, it's a safe space for you to explore what that feels like.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, even just performing in general, like people with stage fright. I was terrified as a kid to read out loud in class. I would never in a million years think to play D&D like that. That would have caused me so much anxiety.
Yeah, for our listeners, Harlan Spinks used to be afraid of
crowds.
Lordy. Well, hey, you know what? Me too, though. Recently gave a speech at a wedding. Went through this whole thing of like realizing, holy shit, I actually really like speaking in front of people now. Dude, I used to hate it.
It fucking feels so good.
You also gave a speech at a wedding. Two different weddings.
Too. It felt fucking sick to have all those people looking at me. This guy.
Spotlights on me.
Literally.
Yeah, Harlan and I just went to a series of weddings, and there were many speeches and many suits and many foods. Anyways.
So some of the other people that I wanted to mention involved in this sort of inclusivity who are making D&D more inclusive is Abria Iyengar. She's a woman of color. She's an RPG performer, and she's also a DM. She's stated that she was often the only woman or person of color at the table. She faced a lot of other players questioning, one, her knowledge of the game, and also was dealt a lot of other overt harassment. She now works to ensure her players don't have to face the same challenges.
Yeah,
Quote,
she's badass.
It wasn't really until streaming that I was like, oh, wow, this is what an all-female table feels like. This is what a queer table feels like. This is what a POC table feels like. Getting to live in the beauty of not having to be the token all the time was what really got me to stay. Persephone Valentine is a trans woman cosplayer, TTRPG content creator, and Twitch streamer who says streaming has helped her create a space away from a lot of the gatekeeping present in TTRPG community. She says she has gotten pushback from players who don't like the fact that a tabletop scene is becoming more diverse and inclusive and who are trying to exclude new voices and players.
This is like when people got upset when the Horizon Zero Dawn
had hair on her face.
This is what that is. This is those fucking people.
Yes, 100%. These are those man-child
gamers.
Those man-child incel fucking samurai sword wielding.
Let the fans decide how big her ass should be.
She's not fuckable enough.
That's a whole episode. Sorry.
Well, yeah, but this also brings me to realizing, I kind of knew this. I have a note that literally starts in all bold. With that being said, Gary Gygax once told a reporter for Icon magazine that, quote, gaming in general is a male thing. Everybody who's tried to design a game to interest a large female audience has failed. And I think that has to do with the different thinking processes of men and women. So the guy that made this thing,
God damn it,
was a horrible misogynist, which, I mean, this tale has been told a bajillion times at this point.
Of course. Tolkien even gets this fucking, or being racist rather, that specific flag.
Yeah, he was like anti-Semitic, right?
Yeah, yes.
But so I couldn't not talk about inclusivity without talking about the history of it and how there are bad actors and misogynists that exist, but it is being sort of reclaimed by fucking people that live and play the goddamn game.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. Color, creed,
Gender.
sexuality, whatever. Just fucking play D&D. Because when it comes down to it, you're gonna role play. You're not even yourself. Like, just inject yourself into the character you're playing, and you're all existing within a separate world anyways. Well, a better world in most cases.
Yeah. Well, and it also doesn't make any goddamn sense because all of these stories, D&D typically takes place in a fantasy realm where there's elves and orcs and gnomes and races, literally races of species of different humanoid beings that literally are different colors and different genders, or don't even have genders. Like, it just makes
I tend to gravitate towards the reptilian type. I'm just saying. I don't even like to play humanoid. I don't even want to be like a person who has like flesh. I want scales.
I want to be a rock monster. Take away my ding dong.
I want to be rock hard as a rock man,
but not rock hard with like a penis. No penis.
I'm asexual, but I'm rock hard.
Honestly,
always.
I want to play a character that didn't reproduce through sexual biological means. I want to be formed from elemental material of atoms in a fucking time vortex. That's what I want to be.
Anakin Skywalker. I want to be fucking. What's the force molecules? What are they called? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Midichlorians.
Yes, thank you.
I want to be those. I want to just play a giant obelisk.
A fucking ward against doom. Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Just a big thing in the jungle. Whatever.
So there were a few other people that I had some quotes from, mainly Erika Ishii, who is, I think she's Japanese. She's Asian American, and she's also gay. And she said that she was able to essentially explore that part of herself, like what we said, in the characters that she played, like playing gay characters while being like, it's just play, guys, before we're being able to realize and feel safe to come out.
Yeah,
and that's
what
awesome.
I was talking about earlier. It's just like an amazing tool for that journey.
I mean, another person that I really like as a player is Allie Beardsley, who is she's transitioning, and they have played a church camp lesbian, a chaotic trans guy, and a non-binary Doberman pinscher. Like, the breadth of things you get to explore is just great. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So, the last thing, what now, right? Beyond, is making this more accessible and these properties getting larger. We mentioned that Critical Role is fucking crazy earlier, and that is because they have accumulated more than 5 million views for some of, like, I think the first episode has 5 million views, and it's a 3-hour-long video on YouTube. That is unheard of.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's 2 years later. There's 114 episodes. Some episodes are 3 hours. Some are fucking 6 hours. They've spun it off into a comic book, an art book, merchandise, and more recently an animated series called The Legend of Vox Machina, which was crowdfunded on Kickstarter in 2019, where it raised, I shit you not, $11.39 million, setting the record for the most highly funded film or TV project on the platform's history.
D&D, baby.
It's also become, a side gig that has resulted in more voice acting work for these people, the non-traditional media aspect. People straight up call the cast of Critical Role for jobs rather than them having to go audition now. And it's really great. I can't talk more highly about D&D and any of these shows and any of the performers. It's independent comedy. If you're anti-capitalist like we are and see sort of late stage capitalism, kind of the wave of it crashing over society, go support independent shit. Stop watching fucking Transformers. Like, stop giving these people money. Go find independent productions of things that are fun and new and creative and fresh.
And it's something you can be a part of too.
Yeah, that's the best part too. It's not a passive thing.
Yeah. Or
So-
it can be passive if you want to.
Yeah, you again, you don't have to, but
That's that's the thing though. It's literally you can find exactly the lane that
Yeah.
you want to be in, and in so many different ways throughout this universe of content. It's
Yeah.
insane.
yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Hasbro revealed Wizards of the Coast had passed $1 billion in sales for the first time in 2021.
Lordy.
They also attributed those numbers to the surge in live play and actual play broadcasts, like what we've been talking about. So, go watch some D&D. It's
I don't think this episode requires the usual sign off.
I don't think it really does.
I think it should be.
How about
Something
this?
else.
How about this? Maybe we'll drop a little hint here, a little nugget that there might be one day, hopefully sooner than later, our own D&D actual play. Now let us know in the comments if you've watched this far, if you'd enjoy that, and if you would like to see that. We'll probably do it anyway, but
Yeah.
stick around.
And roll for initiative.
And everyone wanted to know which president was the true throat goat. And
Okay, I do remember this.
And they are all some sort of eldritch monsters of yore, right? She was also selling videos of her farting in the jar.
I hate this so much. I hate everything about this.
yeah.
Security starboard.